Good. Well, we have a small group, but a distinguished group and all that stuff. Give a few people a little bit of context before I turn it over to our three speakers. We've actually done more pilots in India than in any other country, which is remarkable in itself. And the first one we did, which was in West Delhi, and it's unique in an interesting respect. It is that we gave every household a choice. We said you can either continue with your subsidized public distribution system, subsidized rice, grains, sugar, and oil, or you can have a basic income of equivalent monetary value. And it was very interesting because it showed that, to start with, roughly half and half went for each option. But then people started talking to each other over the first few months, and increasingly people were shifting and wanting to shift to the basic income rather than the subsidy. It was quite an instructive thing, but we had to keep to the experiment, but that was interesting in itself. Then we did a much bigger pilot in Madhya Pradesh, which we've talked about, and the book that's come out on that, we really analyzed the results, and that covered 12,000 individuals altogether, roughly half and half, half with basic income in communities, half without. And alongside that, we did a tribal village, which was everybody in the tribal village was given the basic income. We spent a lot of time, Sarath and myself, in that village and really studied it thoroughly. So the Hyderabad, which we're going to be talking about, in a sense, is a follow-up, if you in some respects. And I'm looking forward very much to hearing it. So I gather there's going to be a video, and then you'll make a presentation, and then we'll follow from that.
Yeah.
How many presentations? 15? 12? Sorry?
How many? Roughly 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, each. 15 minutes minus the video.
15 minutes plus 4.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Guy. Pleasure to be again on a panel with you, Guy. Thank you. And as I think Guy gave a perfect background to this. Yeah. Perfect background to the, and he contextualized it. Madhya Pradesh was 6,000 individuals received the basic income, and 6 didn't. In Hyderabad, we don't have a control group. We have 350 families, that is 1,500 individuals are receiving a basic income, but this is a completely an urban context, and it's the most challenging to implement the basic BN definition and model. And both the Indian pilots, big pilots, both Madhya Pradesh and Hyderabad one, both are, they adhere to the classical BN definition, which actually many pilots don't. Okay, to give you a context about when we said waste collectors, but eventually why it's beyond waste collectors also, we will see because of the universality. Everybody residing in a place had to be given. But then waste collector, majority of them, 60%, 65% are waste collectors. The project is called WorkFREE.
And maybe audio share.
Yeah. There's no sound? Sound? Okay.
Whistle got.
Can I go to the presentation?
Oh, oh. Oh.
Yeah. Okay, the project is called WorkFREE. As I said, it's 350 families, about 1,500 individuals living in 5 different settlements in the city of Hyderabad. The money is given for 18 months and for each adult, and children get half of that, about $12. Cash goes directly into the bank accounts. Many of them didn't have bank accounts, so there is a preparatory phase in which we open their bank accounts and ensure, because I think one of the most important things of the design is that people should gain access, immediate access to their money. So sometimes when we had problems in Madhya Pradesh about people having to go to a bank far away, we actually gave real cash to people. So here, because it's a city, there were banks nearby. We have both statistical and qualitative evaluation of the project. We did a baseline in the beginning, a midline we just completed in the month of June. And an end line is coming up in October. After that, we are also going to do one post-end line 6 months after. In the case of Madhya Pradesh, we did, after 4 years, we went back again to see what remained of that about which Guy will talk, not me. These are the partners, University of Bath. It's located in the University of Bath, India Network for Basic Income. Institute for iWage was the one which was doing the statistical part. And then Montfort Social Institute is the local community organization, because one of the most important things is that people should trust you in order to run a pilot, because there are many, many points where that kind of trust is important to continue your research work and also implement the project. So the project is funded by European Research Council for 2020 to 2024. As I said, it follows all the, maybe Guy, maybe you can sit that side so that you don't have to constantly, yeah. It follows all the, that was really challenging for us. It has to be cash, and that cash also people should have direct access to that cash, and it's universal, which means that you take, in the case of our villages in Madhya Pradesh, it was much easier because there's a natural boundary to the village. Whereas in an urban settlement, we thought it would be difficult, but administratively and also the community-wise, there is a boundary. So you can say, this is the boundary of this particular settlement, and outside this boundary, we won't give. But inside the boundary, whoever it is will get a basic income. Whether they are waste collectors or not, everybody gets. Because in some households, there are some people who do waste collection and some do other jobs. There are many households, nobody does waste collection. So there are contract workers, construction workers. So that is the universal part we implement there. Rich or poor, whoever is inside this settlement of 70 households, they get it. And it is monthly, and it's individual. Every man, woman, and child gets it. And newborns will be immediately included as soon as they are born. If a bride comes from a different settlement to this settlement, she also starts immediately getting a basic income. And of course, it is unconditional. Direct cash transfers to the bank accounts and universal to each urban settlement, individual and not household. You can see, as you can see, this is what Guy was referring to, the subsidized grains project, which is one of the largest food security programs in India, spend about $30 billion. And unfortunately, we also accept that 30% transmission losses is okay. That is the biggest problem, transmission losses. I won't use any other word. Every month and unconditional. Okay. So why did we choose waste collectors? As you can see, much of this waste collection is done manually by these people. It's one of the lowliest jobs in the society. And it also happens that many of them also come from the former untouchable castes. You can see some kind of a continuity sociologically also. And many of them are rural migrants. Our hypothesis is, what transformation in their lives will take place when you give them an unconditional basic income? Definitely, we don't expect that they will leave their occupation, but within that, what kind of an inner engineering will happen in their own lives? That is basically we are trying to look into that. And Vibhor will go a little more into some of the aspects, and Maria also will go into some of those aspects. In terms of dignity, self-respect, and well-being, given freedom to make their own decisions, how do they self-organize themselves? Is emancipation from modern slavery possible through self-organization. These are some of the questions. Vibhor and Maria will go more detail into that. Now, why 18 months? Why do we think 18 months is important? I mean, normal household expenditures have a cyclical, I mean, they have a life cycle of mostly they're 1 year. There are festivals, there are school admissions, or there are seasonal illnesses. So you can actually say a 12-month period is the, you can capture one life cycle. But then these 6 additional months are, there is a euphoria when they receive, because in the beginning, they don't trust. In villages, nobody trusted us that this is something true. This is actually, why should you give us money for no reason? Who are you and who am I? So most probably you are a fraud. Most probably you are. So that's the reason I'm saying trust is the most important thing with the community you want to work with. So we give 3 months for things to stabilize. You could have people completely overspending, or you could have people who are so frozen, they don't want to touch the money. You know, they just keep it in the bank and not use it. We have so many senior women who just for 6 months, they have not touched the money at all, because they say that it could be handy for me when I'm ill, when I'm not well. So it's kind of a security. So you have all those extremes. So 3 months period is something they stabilize and they start believing that, okay, this is going to come, and they start planning. And then you have 12 months and 3 more months to taper off. That is the kind of a logic. Why 18 months? If it is more than 18 months also, it's fine. But I would personally not recommend beyond 2 years, because there is the researchers fatigue and there is the community fatigue also may set in. But I know Give Directly is doing for 12 years. That's a different kind of basic income they give. Now, why $12? I mean, we have roughly calculated that this is, we're not removing any. Okay, because there was a video, I'm going to take another 5 minutes. Is that okay, guy? Yeah, because of the video. Average family size is about 5 to 6 people in the house. So what the basic income that goes to each family is about 4,000 rupees, which is roughly about 25 to 40% of their current average income. So this is a kind of a top up. We are not replacing anything. So it's a top up of 40%. So which, I mean, general principle, what we follow, what we have learned from our seniors, that it shouldn't be so high that it will be artificial. It will be seen as a windfall. It should not be so low that it doesn't matter at all. So you have to find your own sweet spot, and the best definition you can give is, I think, the context. The context will tell you what matters and what will not matter. So in the context of waste collectors and their lives, we feel that this would definitely make a significant contribution. That's it from my end. And I now, Vibhor can come. Vibhor Mathur, he's a PhD candidate in University of Bath. Plus? Okay, I'm so sorry. Maria will do the one additional thing we are doing in this pilot, which we didn't do in Madhya Pradesh. But in Madhya Pradesh, we had a voice organization. So we also saw, if there is a voice organization, a trade union, how will basic income fly? So we compared with unionized villages and ununionized villages. In the case of WorkFREE, we have introduced what Maria is going to talk about, is the plus. That cash alone may not be enough. In fact, this is exactly what I was trying to say yesterday, that what are the supplementary institutional mechanisms we should put in place in addition to giving an unconditional basic income. I think that is an area we really need to think. And at the moment, I think we are not investing much into that. What are the other institutions that are necessary to enrich the outcomes of basic income? So plus is what we call, and Maria is going to talk about plus. After that, Vibhor will come with we have some very few tentative findings, and then also the methodology part. Two, three, I think. Yes. No.
Sorry.
There you have.
This is my notes. 15 minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes. Yes.
I can do that. Thank you. Thank you. Hello. My name's Maria Franchi. I'm a PhD student attached to the WorkFREE project. Sorry. You don't want to hear all that again, though. No. Oh, this one. Okay. I don't know how to do that.
This mic is
working.
okay.
Okay.
This mic is okay, but you can, you want?
Okay.
Can use.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll start again. My name's Maria. I'm a PhD student attached to WorkFREE, and my own focus is a feminist perspective on the project. But I'm going to be describing our plus, because before I was a PhD student, I was a consultant to voluntary sector organisations and a facilitator and trainer around different forms of community organising, which connect quite closely with the plus that I'm about to describe. So that's how I got this job, to describe this. Okay, so let me see if I can organise myself. So what I'm going to do is to try as succinctly as I can to describe our theory of change, because we think that that's crucial to the understanding of the plus. I'm going to talk a bit about how we started to implement through training people in this approach and then in the delivery. And then I'm just very briefly going to identify some successes and challenges, but I think at the end we'll look more at outcomes. That work? No, what have I done? I've done the wrong things. Okay, I worked it out. So we've called it a plus, but we were quite aware that lots of other pluses are actually other economic surrounding services, like welfare services and so on. At one point we discussed calling it magic, partly because it is, and partly because it was easier to say magic than actually describe it. So I'm going to have a go. But the theoretical starting point for our plus is the notion that the UBI creates time, and that in a community saturation pilot like ours, and therefore in a universal policy, this creates the opportunity for the provision of spaces for social change. The plus mimics, I suppose, in some ways, the principles of UBI cash itself that Sarath just described. It's a focus on the equal respect for the individual, the universality of the human condition, the sufficiency of resources to meet our individual and collective needs. We also focus on how security affects possibilities and opportunities, and how unconditionality leads us not to dictate to the needs of people or try to solve their problems, but to develop ways in which they can choose to participate or not, and choose what they want the results of the plus to be. So, keep using the wrong thing. So the aims then of the design were to, as I say, enhance the potential of the cash payments. We wanted to provide space for restoration and transformation through our relationships. And I think I've heard in other sessions, this conference, about somebody was talking about a detox, needing to detox from the ways that things are in order to imagine and embark on the way things could be. So that space for restoration and transformation. Rather than looking for outputs, we're looking at process. So what processes enable people to connect and collaborate to decide the why, what, and how. And we wanted to build a bridge from the individual to the shared to the collective. And again, this, I think, has been a bit of a theme in this conference around the individual and fraternity or community and connection. So looking from my needs to our needs to what is needed. We wanted to create a sustainable and flexible model because we're aware that although the cash is time limited, we could provide through the Plus a sustainable and flexible model that could serve our communities going forward, as well as be replicated elsewhere. So here's a nice load of words on the screen. Too many words. I just wanted to draw attention to this kind of change of paradigm, effectively, from a problem-solving paradigm, which I think is often used in social work, community development, social change, and also in our research, which follows a kind of linear process of input, change, output. Okay, so rather than using our UBI as a problem-solving tool, and I think, again, that's in line with the ethos of UBI, we've adopted a complexity approach so that we're hoping that the recipient's agenda and their needs, rather than the projects or our own external or objective needs, are met. So it's a very, it's about subjectification, really. So it's taking a complexity lens. It's focusing in on the relational rather than the salvational. We're trying to create conditions for emergence rather than decide what needs to be fixed and how it can be fixed. It's about processes. It's qualitative rather than quantifiable. It's co-productive. It's all about participation, democracy, empowering, relationships, and emergence. So what we're interested in is what happens if you do this and the time afforded by basic income is applied to a reflexive, participatory, democratic space, and whether that activates these potentials that we're talking about all the time of UBI and the creation of conditions for the emergence of new social forms, attitudes, behaviours, or a critique of the existing ones. So we're trying to use it to really realise the potential that UBI offers us. So I've just got less words on a slide. Problem-solving approach. How do we change the system to meet the needs of the people? And the relational approach. How do we help people to meet their needs so they can change the system? So just to make it a bit easier. So talking about needs, and we've based our work on the framework of universal human needs developed by Max Neef. I don't know if you can see very clearly on the slide. Two things hit me immediately when I looked at this for the first time. First of all, subsistence, i.e. the eradication of poverty, is only one of all of these. And yet we obsess about it. And secondly, many of these are things that we could say are the potentials we've identified for a UBI. So this creativity, idleness, greater understanding, participation, identity, freedom, all of these things are, kind of connect with the potentials that we've identified in UBI. So I think that hit me when the first time I saw it. But also we feel that a needs rather than a rights-based approach better serves the ecological and social justice concerns that are connected with these things. So we're trying to think about how we can better meet all our needs within planetary resources. And we have different ways we can and want to satisfy these needs. But the best satisfiers satisfy more than one. And I think I was having a conversation with someone yesterday about food, and we were saying, yeah, you can give someone some rice, but that doesn't satisfy our needs in the way that sitting down to a meal together with your family and friends does. It's just food, but actually the way we use that to satisfy our needs is for subsistence could also satisfy a whole load of other needs. And of course, capitalism constricts our choices to unhealthy ways of meeting our needs. You know, social media being presented as a way to meet our needs for connection and participation, or maybe even creation. And there are lots of ways in which our needs have been, or the satisfiers of our needs are commodified and exploitative. So going back to that needs framework, we think it enables us to rethink how we satisfy those needs. So I just wanted to summarize that looking at needs is about the essence of life. It's essential. It's about what is absolutely required by life of us. And it's beyond what we want or what we like or anything. And it's also something driven from our body, from our biological natural selves. We need those things as humans. And that is, of course, around interdependency. So this really horrible drawing that keeps finding its way into slides, I did this drawing and I really apologize. It's about time we actually made it into a nice slide, but we never do. I don't know why. Anyway, what it highlights is what I was just saying, that very often in a linear kind of problem-solving way that we work day to day, we tend to think about what we want or what the solution is, what the proposal is. And that's very at the top, and it's like two people shouting from mountaintops, opposing or competing views or positions or solutions. And then what we're talking about is that is just the satisfier that we have said that we think is the best satisfier. But we very rarely get to the conversation about why we've chosen that satisfier and what the needs are that we have below them. And so the very beautiful picture is intended to show how, by curious questioning, we can come down from the mountain to find that at the bottom we have needs, shared needs, but also the empathy for each other around needs because of their shared and universal nature that can enable us to think of new solutions and new ways of doing things. So that's why that horrible diagram is up there. I'm going to skip that slide. So I'm going to talk now about some other ways other things we've put, I know it's so long, other things we've put in the framework. So other ways of looking at needs, and I only wanted to show this slide because it's a picture of a boat, and we wanted the space we created to build this boat and to provide a solid hull of safety, self-esteem and connection to enable our recipients to set sail. We've drawn on polyvagal theory and understanding of trauma and how that works in the nervous system to think about safety. And we've defined safety not just as the removal of threat, but actually a real feeling of being safe. We've also drawn on the ideas of nonviolent communication, which again is about needs and empathy. And we've used tools like convergent facilitation. And what's really important about these things is that they don't start from solutions. So in most debates, we start with a proposal, a solution. We're not doing that. We're not starting with solutions. We're just focusing on processes. So I won't be long, I just want to go through, I think it was a bit optimistic to say 15 minutes, Sharon, but I just want to go through how we did it. Yeah, that's fine. So I just want to quickly say how we did it. This is a picture of Hyderabad and a picture of some of our communities, or like places like our communities. And having transformed that theoretical synthesis of theories into some kind of practical way of approaching things, we did a week of workshops with our partners, very experienced community development workers, and then I stayed for a year working with them to co-produce the actual activities that we could do that met our theoretical framework and that were appropriate. So I did want to mention that basically what we did was monthly team meetings, which were reflexive meetings, developing practical ways of doing things. We held meetings with a group of what we call community leaders who were volunteers to help us to communicate with the communities. We shared our approach with them. We got them to experience what we were doing, and then we used their feedback to continue to co-produce. And then we convened these monthly meetings in the communities, which were optional, unconditional, open to all, facilitated by the team and community members. And the reflection and adaptation was built in a feedback loop to those planning meetings. And we followed an arc of connection, boat building, visioning, imagining, deciding and acting. And we used games, small group activities, large group conversations to try to create this really safe space that challenged existing power dynamics. So I'm just going to end with a couple of successes and challenges. The biggest challenge was the paradigm shift, both for the workers and for the communities, but also for us as a team trying to develop this. And how easily that highlighted for us, and it's not a linear path. It had ups and downs, and it had resistances and challenges. The practicalities of finding a space in those communities and a time with people who are getting up really early, doing really difficult jobs, coming home exhausted, then their kids come home, so on and so forth. And the depth and breadth of challenging and connecting with existing power relations, so those gendered and existing power relations, existing community organising and so on. Some of the successes were that the meetings added an element of fun and connection that the day-to-day life of our recipients didn't contain. It wasn't transactional or problem solving. The team embraced the learning curve and the deep self-reflection that the approach required. And all the communities have now articulated visions and priorities for change and have started working towards some of them. So just going to end there. Actually, I'm going to end with this because that's a picture of us. And thank you. I'm sorry I ran over. I did have a big job to describe that.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria. Let's turn to the online presentation by Vibhor, who's in Bath, I presume.
Am I audible? I thought I heard guys say my name, but I'm not entirely sure just yet. Fantastic. I'm going to share my screen and no, sorry.
Can we share screen?
Yeah, we can share screen.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's fine. You go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, I'm going to take significantly less time because I'd much rather we speak about what we found so far than go on and on about methodology, which, you know, frankly, I'm annoyed that Sarath and Maria have spoken about all the sexier parts, and I'm left talking about how we found out the answer to some of these questions. So I'm going to be brief. But fundamentally, what we're running is a 24-month mixed method study, fundamentally trying to ask two questions. One, what are the life worlds of the participants with whom we are working? And two, what, if anything, changes in their lives when the cash and the plus come in? We're doing a quantitative survey, which is conducted at the household level. It borrows a lot from other pilots, including more significantly, perhaps, the pilot from Madhya Pradesh, to be able to speak to other pilots and to be able to build on knowledge of our elders, like Sarath mentioned earlier. This quantitative survey happens at the baseline, that is just before the start of the cash, the midline, so halfway into the pilot, so the 9-month mark, the end line at the end, and then 6 months after the end of the cash as a legacy study. Along with this, and very much in conversation with the quantitative survey, are the qualitative tools, which involve things like interviews, focus group discussions, ethnographic participant observation, and some more creative and participatory tools. Like I said, we're interested in understanding these two core ideas, and that broadly we're exploring themes like people's labor choices, experiences of freedom, dignity, and power, people's needs and aspirations, and their multiple strategies of meeting those, people's consumption patterns in terms of food and various other resources that they consume, people's time use, the gendered elements of those, of all of these. We're also then interested in people's social and political participation, not just through PLUS, but also their participation in union activities, in other political organizations. We're interested, like a lot of you in the room, I'm sure, talking about basic income, in their income and their savings and their credit and the sort of monetary aspects of what happens when the cash and the PLUS come in. And we're interested in how people engage more broadly with the welfare services, whether private or state provided, particularly around health and education. And across all of these themes, like I said, we're interested in understanding from the participants and getting their articulations of what their lives are like currently, and then trying to tease out any changes, if there are, as the intervention progresses. This is a rough timeline of where our project, what our project looks like, where it started. We started our research in around August 2021. A lot of that was, very introductory relationship building and sense-making conversations, which then fed into our baseline survey and qualitative tools, which happened around between January to March 2022. May 2022 is when our cash started. October this year is when it's going to end. So in the middle of that, around February, we had a midline survey, and between November through February, we had a qualitative research. October, the money ends. Around October, sorry, I've gotten that wrong, is when we have our inline survey. And then around December, we have the final qualitative round of research. And we'll have a legacy study 6 months after. The reason I think this timeline is significant is because our qualitative and quantitative research are not happening parallel to each other, but are very synergistic in many ways. The qualitative research helps create a lot of the groundwork, which then feeds into better and more targeted questioning in the quantitative survey. And findings from the quantitative survey is informing subsequent rounds of deeper exploration, meaning-making, questioning in the qualitative rounds. As far as the quantitative data collection is concerned, like I said, we had the MP Basic Income Pilot as the starting point, but we also brought in various other pre-tested survey instruments from major surveys in India, most significantly including things like the India Human Development Survey. We also, like I said, involved qualitative findings from interviews and focus group discussions to help involve this. And we also brought in a couple of gamified modules, for the lack of a better term, to measure people's preferences around labor choices, as well as to measure people's expenditure on household consumption items and assets. Importantly, as Shardai was mentioning earlier, we're not running a randomized control trial. We're using what's described as the pre-test, post-test design. And if you ask me too many questions on the quant side, you will realize how illiterate I am. So please be kind. But predominantly, we're running quasi-experimental design in which, because this is a small sample size, the entire universe of the participants serve as their own control group. We're not trying to establish direct causality. We're trying to see what changes in people's lives between the baseline, endline, and midline and endline, and generate the sort of evidence that can test strong associations and effects between the UBI and between well-being and people's labor choices. In terms of the qualitative methods, and I apologize for going so quickly, so please give me a signal if I'm speaking too fast, as I tend to. But in terms of qualitative methods, we're using predominantly these 4 tools. We're using lots of interviews. We're using a mix of life story and case study interviews, a lot of which are focused on depth over breadth. We are trying to identify participants who are typical in our bastis. So in our communities, that would be garbage collector family, husband, wife, 2 children, and that forms a typical case. We're also trying to identify some atypical cases. So a lady who has caring responsibility for all of her siblings, children, and an old person, or an old couple who do not have any source of income, and trying to get stories from both of these types of cases and explore what's happening in their lives. We're then doing lots of focus group discussions, which allow us to have more multi-vocal exploration through homogeneous and heterogeneous groups. These are meaning making, that we're trying to understand how they understand concepts like freedom and dignity. They're exploratory, so we're trying to understand what their labor and what their work day looks like. as well as confirmatory. So if we are finding any sort of associations with in the quant study or in our observation, we are trying to see whether or not this is happening because of the UBI, whether this is happening because of the plus or any other things. All of this is combined with a fairly deeply embedded ethnography, which is, researchers like myself and Maria and Sharad and lots of others spending long periods of time in the communities, just hanging out, as the stereotypical anthropological phrase goes. And finally, we're using a lot of more creative participatory tools, especially with children, where traditional narrative-based methods are often not being suitable. And I think most notably, the example is Sharad and myself playing kabaddi with a group of 6-year-olds, which I promise you they were much better at than we were. And finally, just to wrap up, obviously we recognize that what we're doing ticks every single red flag on an ethics committee approval board. And not just is cash generally unique, but a particular situation of money coming from the UK to poor and marginalized populations in India. And as a result, we had to go through a lot of ethical clearances, which included first getting clearance from the funder for the whole project, from the university ethics committee for each project, then from an institutional review board in India. And finally, each individual researcher for their project has to then get ethical clearance. So this is just a quick overview of how we've done the data collection. I think I'm going to hand back to Sharad Bhai to go into the particularly exciting bits of what have we found so far.
Yeah, I'll just, we have just completed our midline. I know, I am. Yeah, are we sharing the?
You're sharing two?
Yeah. Oh, no, not this one, not this one. Vibhor, can you share? Are you sharing? Can you share, Vibhor?
I can share.
The roundtable one?
Yeah, I can share. Give me a second.
Just indicative, 3-4 important findings. If you have permission to share?
Yeah. Just give me 1 second. I'm just opening it up.
Yeah. In the midline, which happened 9 months after we gave the started the cash transfers, one very, very important finding came through, which was really surprising to us. In the beginning, we asked people how many days in a week you work. So, yeah, you can see. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, this is the, let's look at the left side one. Total number of working people in the family. One person working, primary occupation, wage labor. 2 people working, 5 people working. What you find here is that in the baseline, 24% families had 1 person working, and 56% families had 2 persons working full-time, okay? Now, this, you can see the shift, which means okay, nothing about me. Okay, you can see there's a slight shift happening, and the shift has gone, instead of 2 people working, 1 person working, which means it could be many things. It could be that somebody who is doing a full-time job has become working less. Okay. Similarly, if you see there, how many days in a week you work? 7 days. 54% families said we work 57 days a week. And that shifted in the midline. You see only 43% working 7 days. And then the number of days worked, 6 days increases which means that these people have actually shifted, which in summary means that people who are working 7 days, nearly 12% of people started working 6 days, which means that they're taking 1 day rest. Now, I don't know, is it a good thing or a bad thing? I think it's a good thing. In a civilized society, so they should take some rest. Now, yeah, so this is very, very interesting. In fact, something similar, not something similar, in the Madhya Pradesh pilot guy, you remember that people started doing more cultivation and less of wage labor. So that was a very, very interesting, dramatic, quite a dramatic change. This is one indicative. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah. Yeah, this is really, really, this is also surprising. I mean, I never thought about this. We asked people's preferred periodicity. Usually we expect that everybody wants it monthly, isn't it? Now, suddenly we see that they want it fortnightly. I think Vibhor has a very interesting explanation. Would you like to come in, Vibhor, and explain what you thought was the reason for that?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we had lots of conversations with people about what is the cycle of cash flow in your month. When does the money come in and when does the money go? Because if you ask this question, we either assume people will say monthly or people will say weekly, get the money as quickly to me as possible. But actually the answer is fortnightly. And this seems to track the answers people gave to my questions around cash flow. When does money come in? When does money go? So garbage collectors don't get any wage from the state. Their entire income comes from the money that they collect as fees, service fees from the households where they go door to door to collect money, which means that every month there is a battle that they have to fight with their clients to say, they will go to the house, the clients will say, oh, I don't have money today, I'll give it to you tomorrow. They'll try to negotiate their monthly set rate every month. So from the 5th to the 15th of the month is when the garbage collectors spend their time trying to collect money, collect their monthly wages. And between the 20th and 25th is when their children's school fees payment go out, is when they have something called chitti, which is community chit funds where they save their money. Their chitti payments go out. If they pay rent for their house towards the end of the month, that's when the money goes. And effectively, that means that there is a 10 to 15 day gap, a black hole effectively of cash flow. And this is one story of many others where people just try to say that effectively a lot of their poverty is characterized by the poverty of access to cash. In the sort of arguments that Guy has been making, for instance, about the emancipatory value of basic income, a lot of their struggle is with having access to cash. And actually, these fortnightly payments track so perfectly with when they have deficits in their access to disposable income. And at what point of in their monthly cash cycle, they actually need to rely on petty credit just to be able to meet day-to-day needs. And I found that entire journey of when they get money and when the money needs to go out and how the cash helps cushion the blow of when there is that deficit really, really fascinating.
Yeah, thank you, Vibhor. I think, yeah, that's just where I feel UBI is a global idea, but I think the devil is in the detail. How much to give, when to give, everything, I think so. The design of a pilot has to be so locally fine-tuned because that's exactly where it matters to them. Yeah, maybe just one more. Yeah, you can see, and after that I close and give it back to Guy. You can see where the money was used. You see much of it has gone into household consumption. I mean, these households, one is to run the household to get the groceries and all that. The other is because they're entrepreneurs, they need to constantly borrow. They're in a continuous cycle of debt. So they reserve some monies for the payments and this money for some money for the day-to-day consumption. You can see here, 66% of the households have used it for household consumption. 46 have used it for medical expenses. You can see all the great development outcomes, Guy. Education, 36%. Savings has gone into 22%, and 15% paying off debt. And investing in business, you can see, will be a delight to the neoliberals. Yeah, let's move on, Vibhor. Anything you want to add, Vibhor?
I mean, I think just within each of these, there are some, amazing stories. Something like this, like 40% of the households said they were able to start a new pot of savings. And in our qualitative findings, we find that many of these have savings for the first time in their lives, because it's the first form of surplus that they've ever had within their household. Similarly, for loans, 25% of families were able to pay off completely existing debts that they had. And again, in the qualitative research, we find that these are debts that they had outstanding from their parents, from their grandparents. And because this is the first sort of inflow of surplus, guaranteed regular surplus that is coming into their lives, 1 in 4 households have been able to pay off like old existing loans. I'm not going to go too much into this. And then this one, Shadbhai, if you want to speak about this one very quickly.
I think this will be, our government will be very dissatisfied with this, because their intake of fish and eggs and mutton and chicken has increased quite substantially. Yeah, I think let's stop there, Guy. Hand over to you. And if needed, we can always come back, Vibhor and Maria. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, well, that was pretty comprehensive. As I've been sitting here listening to the 3 excellent presentations, I've been reflecting on how long the journey has been in developing the methodology for doing pilot basic income schemes. And this, I think, is not appreciated enough at all by those who are rushing out to do basic income experiments today. The Madhya Pradesh pilot took us over 5 years to do. I remember we used to go out into the villages, refining, developing the questionnaires, developing the methodology, going back, testing again, refining. And some people rush out, do it, back of an envelope, questions, and you see anybody who's an expert who's done that sees immediately that this is shabby stuff, okay? And I'm afraid to say that I've seen dozens of projects that call themselves basic income pilots by very prominent people who clearly have not gone out into the field and spent the time really living what they're trying to do. And I make this point because we went through a lot of learning, and I hope that anybody here or elsewhere who's contemplating doing basic income experiments realize before they go into it how long. I don't know if anybody here is from Give Directly, but that particular project where millions of dollars are being expended, the researchers, so-called, have been arrogant to the extreme, have not gone out and done the dirty work that is essential for this. And I congratulate this project for building on, and I'm very pleased, obviously, they're using it, but I think it's very important that what you're doing, and I think you're going to show a lot of very interesting results. With that off my chest, let me ask if there are any questions or comments. Greg.
Thanks for that.
Greg.
Oh, thanks for learning much more. It's really fantastic. I was just thinking, to your point, Guy, about methodology in terms of the findings that a lot of the basic income pilots also give an emphasis on the money and how it's used. I mean, given what Marie said about creating time as a point of a pilot, it's not so much about creating time, it's about creating discretionary time. You know, a form of kind of temporal justice is what basic income potentially liberates. And that politics of time is really important. I just wonder about the careful kind of ways of tracking what people do with their time, you know, and time use kind of studies and the way in which people spend it on other activities. You know, Sarath mentioned rest, but it can be care, it can be enough education. So I think, you know, that emphasis given to time, I think in methodology should also be factored in pilots. And the second thing, I suppose, more generally, when we talk about ethics, you know, in terms of clearance, and I think that that's important, but also the legacy effects, you know, in the in Madhya Pradesh, you know, putting fish in the dams, villagers buying toilets, these are legacy effects when the income was pooled. But it still always slightly worries me as a researcher too, just about how much we are transparent about pilots and when they finish and when the cash stops and what happens. And of course, it's not a reason not to do it, but I still think that that's an important consideration with trials. Yeah.
Thanks, Greg. Yes, yeah, you have to come front. Alexander.
Can you tell anything about the effects on dignity, on self-esteem, on how they see themselves compared to the rest of the society?
That's a good question. A couple more. Yes, Hilda. Now you've got to get fast. Yes, that'll be funny. Okay, Hilda Latour.
Yeah, the beauty is in the details. And I want to thank you, and I know you for quite a while, that to call these participants instead of recipients, call them waste collectors instead of waste pickers, focus on needs and relations instead of solutions and problems. So thank you for that. I think it will contribute to make the untouchable more touchable and maybe even huggable. My question is, have you already come across any unexpected results or surprising effects from your point of view, but also maybe from the participants' point of view, that there were effects that they did not expect?
Okay, thank you. Any other questions at this point? While I'm thinking of it, Sarath and Maria and Vibhor, I think one thing we learned tremendously from the Madhya Pradesh project was how important the legacy surveys are. I think we've been unique in that respect. What we did, after the end of the pilot, when they ceased to receive any basic income, a few months later, we did a survey and went back and asked, because we wanted to see what changes would persist and what things would go backwards, okay, once people stopped. And then, as Sarath mentioned, we did a follow-up nearly 4 years afterwards to see, again, what had drifted backwards and what had continued. And the lessons were very good. We've written it up as a paper, but I would recommend that anybody who has connections with people doing short-term experiments in the United States, for example, Scott, should be encouraged to do similar legacy surveys, because there are lessons there for policymakers as well as analysts, and given the shortness of many of them. So I think that's a very important part of this project. So would you like to respond to the points that have been made?
Yeah, I'll start with the first one from Greg. Yeah, that's why I'm coming. I'm so scared of you. Okay. Greg, we took 2 kinds of consent from the participants. I think we spend a lot of time, because we are talking about not just from the heads of the household, but also from every single participant, adult participants. One consent is to participate in the program, to receive cash and do the needful. And second is to participate in research. And both were voluntary. I mean, they're not mandatory. So they need not have agreed to them. And fortunately, most of them agreed. I think what has been continuously being told and reminded is the fact that it's going to come to an end in 18 months. So the plus process has been very, very, that's keeping a continued association with them, talking to them constantly. So the project has, I mean, those who are conducting the project at the community level and also as research, we have been continuously in touch with them. So now, very interestingly, we had a roundtable to showcase our midline results. One of the roundtable participants, we had 4 project participants sitting on a panel, like the way we did in Madhya Pradesh National Conference guy. So we brought 4 of them to speak to the roundtable participants, who are the academics and civil society and politicians. Now, somebody asked that, were you told that this project is going to end? I said, yes, they told us. I mean, 18 months it's going to end. Then said, so after that, what are your plans? Somebody coyly asked, what are your plans after that? She said that, I don't want to think about that. See, all of us are going to die. Are we going to be having a plan of how to die? So, I mean, she was so poetic. I was really taken aback by the answer she gave. Yeah, so I think if somebody asks me what is the most painful part of a pilot, it is the day cash transfers end. People really, really feel bad about it. I remember we did, first Madhya Pradesh pilot was only 12 months. Then we decided to extend it by 5 more months. So then we didn't tell them right in advance because we wanted to get all the money sorted. So then we made a campaign to go to every village to tell them, now look, we are going to get it for another 5 months. Okay. So we went to this village. We said that we want to have a meeting. So they thought meeting is about asking more questions and all that. Then we announced that we are going to get it for another. There was one very senior woman, 75 or 80-year-old woman. She burst out crying. I said, why are you crying? She said, last night, I knew that you were coming and conducting this meeting. Last night, the whole night I was praying that this should continue. And now you come and tell me it's continuing. I mean, it was not a moment of joy, but it was a moment of pain. You know how painful it is when it ends. So, Greg, you really put your finger on the issue there. It's an ethical issue. We have to handle that issue. Otherwise, we can't do pilots. All pilots have to be limited. I paused there. Vibhor is the one who is dealing with the question Alexander asked about dignity. And I think that's his PhD thesis, actually. So, Vibhor, I would like you to respond to that.
I promise I won't give an answer as long as a thesis. But fundamentally, I would say 2 things happen, or 3 things happen with this cash plus that are very visible in the first 6, 8, 9 months. The first is the experience of urban poverty is characterized, amongst other things, by a form of invisibilization. Every time any urban city in India wants to do beautification, they build massive walls in front of slums so that people can't be seen. Garbage collection as a profession happens early in the morning before anyone wakes up. The streets need to be cleaned. And if anything, if they are recognized as people, the participants of our project, they are recognized either as garbage collectors or as poor or as low caste. And perhaps the most significant thing that started to come out right at the start of the cash transfer was they said, oh, you know what, we're feeling a sense of recognition as a form of citizenship. And this argument has been made, I know, by a number of people who are probably at the Congress about the sense of citizenship and recognition that basic income can provide. But they said 2 very interesting things to me. First, they said that you gave us our money not because we are something. So most schemes will say, if you are Dalit, you can apply for this scheme. If you're a young woman, you can apply for this scheme. But you just came and said, we're just giving this money to you because we want to work with you. There's no markers, there's no performance I have to put up, no person I have to be. So you gave me this money. It is recognizing me for who I am. And that sense of recognition I found really, really powerful. And I know that speaks to stories that I have heard and read from pilots across the world. The second is a lot of the things that we have found, especially in our midline, whether that's the forms of assets that people have purchased. So lots of women are telling us stories of how they've purchased almirahs, cupboards. People have purchased mixer grinders. Women have purchased scooters. men have been able to, buy new clothes for their family. All things with which people are able to live up to a life of dignity, give themselves a security which they did not earlier have. So when women are buying cupboards, that is representative of them being able to put their things away the way they would have liked, as opposed to them being stacked away in a corner in a little room in the hut that they live in. An old lady said to me, I said, what has been the best thing that's happened to you in the last 3 months? I was having a regular chat with her over a cup of tea. And she says, oh, my granddaughter got married. I said, amazing, that's great news. And she says, no, that's not the best thing. The best thing is that at her wedding, as a grandmother, I could give her a gold chain. And that ability for that grandmother to live up to her relationships of being a grandmother, live up to what it means to be her relationship in that community, in that family, was the most dignifying feeling. And third, I would say, with the sort of things that people have been able to access, whether that's insurance, savings, loans, etc., it's moving away from a lot of the regular precarity, a regular humiliation, stigmatization that's a part of being low caste, garbage collector, urban poor. And I would say very, very superficially, those are, I would say, the three biggest directions within which dignity is being enhanced through our pilot, or that we are seeing being enhanced through the pilot.
Thank you. You want to add something?
Yeah, very quickly. One of the things that we didn't have time to show, Alexander, was the number of households that repaired the toilets, improved the toilets. That, I would say, is related to sense of dignity and sense of hygiene, particularly in a crowded urban settlement. So to have a clean toilet, a good toilet, is something that is similarly senior citizens who are old and no longer able to work. Often they have to depend on their sons to get their medication, the regular medication that they use. So sons sometimes bring, sometimes don't. But when you have cash of your own, you don't ask them, you don't beg for your medicines. So you go and buy your medicines. I think Vibhor we have seen many senior citizens, women, feel very proud that I go buy my own medicines. And when my grandchildren come, I'm able to give them chocolates. That is a sense of your dignity and self-esteem. Any surprising results?
Maria?
Yeah.
Maria, do you want to add to this?
Yeah.
Yes, I'll just quickly say one thing, Guy. Sorry, I don't want to keep people for ages. We
got 3 minutes.
Yeah, okay, I'll speak even quicker. In terms of the ethics of ending, I just wanted to put the plus point in here, because that's what we're talking about in terms of sustainability, is providing some regular way that people can deal with the stuff they've got to deal with together, that can kind of cushion that ending, but that it has that legacy. And so the plus started just after the cash, 3 months after the cash, and will finish after the cash goes. So there's still time with hands-on support and so on. And I just wanted to say about the recognition stuff, particularly from a feminist, I'm looking at the experience of women and the recognition, the connections, the sharing, and the lack of isolation, particularly around, household relationship problems, where it's very difficult for them to share. They're living in households with their mother-in-laws or daughter-in-laws and so on, and it's all very difficult. But I've heard a lot of women say to me that ability, the recognition, the connectivity that the project is providing is enabling them to realize they're not alone, but also they don't have to suffer in silence. So that's it, really.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I think you'll all agree that it's been a fascinating sight of an ongoing project. I was very pleased, Vibhor, that you mentioned a term that I came up with during the course of the Madhya Pradesh, because we were going around the villages in the middle of the process, and we were giving, don't forget, a very small amount of basic income, about a third of subsistence or half of subsistence according to different areas. And I kept saying, look, the effects are much greater than the value of the money we're giving out. And I came up with the theory that the emancipatory value of the basic income is much greater than the money value. and it induces feedback effects. And I wrote a paper on it, and we've got it in the book. Those who would like to see how that hypothesis is actually translated. But I think you're going to find the same thing. And it's a very important part of a basic income that we need to emphasize more than we have in the community of basic income. So thank you very much. Let's have a round of applause for the three speakers.
The Korean style. Thank you.
함께 해주셔서 감사합니다. 12시 반부터 2시시 극장으로 해서 이번 대회 마지막 세션이 진행됩니다. 많은 참여 바랍니다. On behalf of all staff, I want to take a moment to express my heartfelt appreciation for your participation and awesome presentations that you gave today. And I'm also